Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Today, we are talking about the foundations of elite performance. I'm joined by Dr. Cassidy Preston and Dr. Tracy Tilton. And hopefully, by the end of the day or the end of this conversation, you'll walk away with some ideas about performing under intense stress, intense pressure or stress, and what you can do to improve your own performance in your life. So, without anything further, um, Dr. Preston, your work centers around the results trap for leaders, advisors, athletes. Um, why do you feel like focusing on the end goal causes people to underperform?
Yeah, I think, well, there's nothing inherently wrong with like having an end goal or even thinking about it. But when we get sucked into it, when it becomes all encompassing, it consumes you, everything is about that. And that's all you can think about. Well, then you lose perspective, right? And you lose sight of, well, who do you want to be? How do you want to show up? Why are you doing it in the first place? What is your process? And the weight of that can become unbearable. We make things often bigger than what they are. These big shiny objects. We chase perfection. We think it's a fantasy that's like, oh, if I achieve this goal, everything will be great. And it's like, that's not exactly, then it's on to the next thing. And so but it's so common, and our society is often like so consumeristic, right? So you think of like I need this, I have to achieve that. How am I doing compared to someone else? Social media, like it creates a very outside in world is another way to think of the result traps, where the external world dictates how I feel. When things go well, I feel great. When things aren't going well, I feel terrible. And so we're very dependent on the external. Like, this is not an optimal way to perform, right? Very normal to fall into that trap. But if we can flip the approach to go a bit more inside out, it's very healthier and greater for performance, where we get clarity on who we want to be, right? In sports, a very cliche is like, go play your game. But what is your game? In any high performance setting, it's like, hey, just go focus on what you can control. Well, what are the things that you can control? What is your process? And not just what you do, but how you feel while you do it. That's who you're being. And it takes some reflection and going in. It's mindfulness, it's awareness and choice and commitment. And when we can combine those together, well, now we get this inner sense of like quiet confidence, this certainty, and then you go tackle the outer world. We can't perform in our own heads. We do the prep in our own head, mindful before, so then we can be mindless while we're out there and just be in the present, trusting our training, trusting who we want to be, and just letting it happen and flowing. So from a performance setting, so that's kind of like a high level look at that results trap and why it's so common, and a big way of what we would try to debunk.
Thank you. I think it makes a lot of sense. Dr. Tilton, did you want to add to that?
I was just thinking when you were describing people focusing just on the end goal, like say, like take someone who's in the NFL and they started off the season being like, okay, we want to go to the Super Bowl. Like all the teams start with that being their end goal.
Yeah.
So what would you say about like someone in that type of position, athlete at that level, having that type of goal and how they should maybe change their mindset? Or, I mean, I don't think they're going to change their mindset.
Yeah. Well,
because that's what they get paid to do, is to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think about that?
So the way I would frame it is, so there's nothing wrong with having the goal to win the Super Bowl or to win your championship or to get the contract and the things that you want. There's nothing wrong with having the goal. And in fact, the last thing we want to do is like make people want it less. That would be weird. But one of the ways I like to look at the relationship with external results is we want to have a healthy relationship with results.
Yeah.
When like the main problem again, or one of the main problems, is when winning and losing becomes like life or death and an unnecessary, like it makes it bigger than what it is. Your whole identity is tied to whether you win the Super Bowl or not. Well, like only one team's going to win the Super Bowl. Does that mean everybody else is like a bad person and a bad athlete? Like, it's a very limited way of, from the athlete standpoint approaching it. From a fan standpoint, like, yeah, great. You want to like, it's dramatic, it's entertainment, so like make it all about the Super Bowl if you want. But from an athlete and a performer standpoint, have the goal, but have a healthy relationship with it. And don't make it bigger than what it is. And then what I would really prioritize though is like, how do we want to play? What is the way that we play that optimizes our probability of getting the result that we want? But also it's like, hey, we showed up at our best. What's our identity? What are our strengths? How do we want to, create the most leverage and capability to perform at our best to potentially win the Super Bowl? And if we go do that and we don't win, well, at least like we gave it all that we had. And then so now you're changing the definition of success. And often that's what the best athletes are doing. They're not chasing this, they're chasing something that's their own game, their own thing. And then it eventually leads to that. And so it doesn't mean not to have that conversation and not to have that goal, but it's have a healthy relationship with it. And then how can we prioritize something that is more of a process oriented definition of success, a priority as well, right? And again, I talk about switching the priorities. When we switch the priorities from internal to external, means it doesn't mean we're lowering the priority of this, mean we care about it less. We're just caring more about that. And so therefore then it flows down from there. And that's kind of one of the ways I'd break it up. Because a lot of times people's like, oh, people focus on the process over the results. It means the results doesn't matter. You don't talk about the results. Okay, well, like, that's unrealistic. And then people get like, they shame themselves. Oh my God, I want the results and I'm thinking about the results and I shouldn't. And it's like so confusing. No, you can care as much as you want about the results. Can we create a healthy relationship with it? Or is it consuming you, throwing you off, etc.? So that's how I'd answer that.
Yeah, I know. I think I brought this up with Aaron before, that there is actually an NFL player, I think his name's AJ Brown, who reads a book called Inner Excellence on the sidelines when he's not in the game.
Yeah.
Because he's like offense, when defense is out. He reads this book and everyone was like, why is he reading at a game that he has to go play in like 2 seconds, Yeah. But he said it's like the same as like mindfulness to him, and it like recenters him between, when he's actually playing stuff, and that's how helpful it's been to him to motivate and look at it from like a holistic standpoint rather than just, all I want to do is win, which of course we want to win, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That reminds me of back when I was an athlete and I played hockey. My coach used to, when we would get into the playoffs, used to talk about playoff mode and playoff mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that he would always stress, and I think this is kind of a starter version of what you're talking about, Dr. Preston, is he would say, okay, you're in the playoffs. Every single game is your last game. The important thing is, it's less important to focus on whether or not you're winning the game, but you get to walk away from the game saying you did everything you could. You played your best game.
Yeah.
But it was, for me, it was incredibly effective in giving me clarity and focus during the playoffs and not being, in that results trap where I'm like, okay, I'm trying to get to the championship. It's okay, let's focus on the game in front of you.
Yeah. And a lot of what that does is, we call it like pre-acceptance, and accepting the range of results. It's like accepting we could lose. And a lot of times we don't, as athletes or people, do a great job of that. It was like, I can't have that outcome. And the more you like, I can't have it, it's so bad, it's a nightmare. Now it like has weight on you. We're fearful of it. We try to avoid it and we're chasing this. We're not present and in the moment. We have this emotional charge of a fantasy nightmare. So we actually get them to own the realities of this situation. Play like it's your last. It could be your last game. Like you could lose. It's winner. One funny story. So I use that a lot with athletes. Like if you can't accept, you might, not score in the next game. Then like maybe you should quit. Like that's what you signed up for. You might not score. Like it's like, oh, okay, well I can accept I might not score. Then now we can let it go and just go play and just be happy with who you're being. And then they're free. They're not trying to score, not trying to get the outcome. What happens? They're more likely to get it. Like works every time. No, not exactly, but it works pretty well because it frees them up. A funny anecdote to that is, I've worked with some like surgeons where it is life and death on the line. They do difficult surgeries. I was like giving them the like, all right, pre-acceptance and like, going inside out. I'm like, wait a second. This is not just an athlete accepting that they could win or lose. This is like a doctor accepting like the life or death of his patients. I'm like, I don't want you to be indifferent to the life or death of your patient, but if you can't accept the burden of being a doctor, then maybe you shouldn't have been a surgeon, right? Like that's what you signed up for, and you can own that and come to realities of that sometimes you get to save someone's life and sometimes it doesn't work. And he's like, oh, no one's ever said it to me that way before. And all of a sudden, now it frees him up to be, his heart rate was lower in surgeries, even more adept. Was already a very good surgeon, but that perspective, matters a lot.
Yeah. a lot of what you're talking about and what you're describing to me is the ability to avoid that like that quicksand that tends to happen to a lot of athletes and just people in general, where they're so focused on the result and they make a mistake, and rather than quickly correcting, they just start to sink as if they're in quicksand.
Yeah, 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 and it's like almost the more they fight it, the more they sink. So,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, yeah. So it's like instead of like, hey, just stop moving, grab the stick, and pull yourself out. Like, yeah, it's they're spinning their wheels and they sink more. So and they panic, and so it's having perspective and knowing who you are, or where you are, and how to move forward is that's the inner game work, and what mental performance is all about.
So would you attribute that to like emotional intelligence on any level?
Yeah, big time. Yeah, a lot of it is, being self-aware. Like I said, mindfulness is like at the core of what we're doing. It's
Mhm.
it's self-aware, as well as having choice and advocacy, and it's not just well accept everything and then no commit. It's acceptance with commitment. It's
Mhm.
self-awareness with choice, and when we combine those together, that is mindfulness. That is the ability, to regulate your emotions, to regulate what's going on in the world and how am I processing it,
Mhm.
and whether it's a mistake I've made or it's a context that I'm in, whether it's a big moment or there's adversity or someone's coach has got it out for me, or this employee said this, or I didn't get the sale, like whatever it might be. How are we processing and filtering it? What stories are we telling about ourselves?
Mhm.
And a big way I like to frame it, that I think is quite interesting, is like you think of asking the questions of like the philosophical question of like who are we? Right? Oh, a
Right.
weird question. Well, sometimes an easier question to start with is like, well, who are we not? And I like to reflect on, well, we're not what we do or achieve or think or even feel, right? We're more than just a character in a story. We're the author of the story. And again, so as the author of your story, you have awareness and choice. You can't change the past, but we can narrate it. Two people in very similar situations had things have gone well, things that didn't go so well. One's like, yeah, this happened, but that happened, but then this happened. It's like, nothing's going my way, right? And it narrates in this negative tone where the other person's like, similar situation. Yeah, but look how I learned and I grew and I did do this and I did that. And they're narrating a very different format. So that matters. In the present moment, it matters. Do you see yourself as a victim or things that everyone's out to get you, or you can be the hero of your own story? Well, if you're the author, I hope you choose to be the hero of your own story. And then most importantly is the next page, right? The next chapter in the book, the next page. How are you going to show up and write it? And again, if you haven't done the work to be intentional, which is another way of being mindful, to be self-aware and know what you want and who you want to be and how you want how are you going to write the next page? You're kind of like, oh well, let's see how it goes. No, like there is adaptability in it. However, there's also intentionalness. How am I going to show up in this context? And that takes some self-reflection, emotional intelligence, self-awareness,
Mhm.
to go through that.
Okay.
We have a question from the audience I want to throw in here. From a professional athlete standpoint, how do you help them through serious injuries? What's the message there?
Yeah, great question. I think everyone's going to face various adversities in life. An injury to an athlete can be quite substantial. Just like, if you got fired or demoted or lose a huge client, etc. A case didn't go the way you wanted. One of the main things that we do is to collapse the fantasy nightmare with an athlete, meaning often we think it's such a bad thing to fail, right? We think it's such a terrible thing to get hurt, to be out, to not get to play. And again, it's not something we want. However, what is the silver lining that can come out of it? And having an open mind, and vice versa. What's also we call it collapsing the fantasy, and being successful, playing all the time, getting the results that you want. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. And so this comes from Dr. John Demartini's work and collapsing fantasies and nightmares. We're just seeing it as an outcome, and we can grow and move forward regardless. So I'll use in sport, like playing all the time, succeeding, winning a championship. Well, what comes with that? Pressure, expectations, target on your back. Teammates maybe getting jealous, envious of you. Like it's great. It's what you want. I don't want you to want it any less. We want a healthy relationship with it. but we have perspective to see it's like, well, it's an outcome and it takes a lot of effort and it's a result, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows. And vice versa, when we fail or fall short or don't get what we want or get injured, okay, well, how can I grow from that? It can be great opportunity to develop grit, resilience, perspective. It can humble you. Your love of the game can come back and be that much stronger because of it. So when we can see this, now what we want athletes to be doing during, there's multiple things, but one of the big things we want them to do during, big adversity is like, well, how can I make the most out of this situation? Versus, oh, look what I can't do. Look what's not going my way, the victim mentality versus, all right, how can I make the most out of this and focus on what I can do and get to do and grateful to do and how am I moving forward? And so when we do that, well, when they get back to playing and they've had that, like now their ability to be that much more adaptable, have that much more grit, have that much more of a healthy attitude is it can help a lot. There's a few other things, but that's the high level one that I really like to focus on.
So I have a question. How would you approach working with someone who is like a pro athlete and then they retire or get an injury that, let's just say they retire, and so much of their identities perhaps tied into them being this big superstar and, fans loving them and, all this adulation and stuff. So if someone retires and they are at risk of maybe losing that identity, how would you work with them?
Well, it might depend on a few things, but one of the top two would be one, building out a new identity. So like it's time to evolve and adapt versus holding on to this old one. Mm-hmm. And making sure that even in their old identity and who they are, like it's not 100%, I am just this one thing, right? Back to like, who are we? Well, I am what I do and what I've achieved. That's not like, there's more to us than that. And especially, you don't just play sports and don't just achieve this. Like there's often, there's other relationships away from the arena of their sport that we want to expand their identity first and foremost. And then it's an opportunity to evolve now and like, all right, well, now I can do other things, be more present over here, engage in this, build, new hobbies, new activities. And one of the key words that I like to look at is contribution, right? If you think about, one of the foundational things that help us thrive and create meaning in life, there's growth on one side, but the other big one is contribution. So what are I, as an athlete, you always feel like, or often feel like you're contributing, right? I'm part of a team. I get to contribute. I'm supporting our goal and where we're going. And so one of the ways that then, I encourage, well, how can I contribute in a new way now? And you can go back to being injured. How are you contributing in a new way? You can contribute maybe not on the field or on the ice, etc., but they can contribute by being a good leader, by being a good teammate. They can watch video. They can be doing the little things that do make a difference. And it's maybe not how they want to contribute, but they adapt. And then when they get to go back on the field, it helps. And when they're transitioning out, it's like, all right, let me find a new way to contribute based on their values and, what they want in their life. But it takes some, it's a bit of a process, and it takes obviously, it's nothing you can really rush either. So and it's okay to be at a, I'll say lost for a period of time because you're trying to figure out what's the next phase. Just like a young 20-year-old going to college or leaving, like, all right, what's the next phase of my life? Like, you don't have to rush into that. You can marinate in it a bit, and that's a healthy stage to be at as well.
Okay.
So I wanted to ask, what limiting beliefs do you feel like highly educated or highly successful professionals, you talked about working with a surgeon earlier, what limiting beliefs do they tend to struggle with the most?
Well, yeah, I think there's a few. I think probably the biggest one is always acceptance, meaning like we can't accept failure. Like meaning we see acceptance as like a weakness often. Whereas I like to switch it as like it's a superpower. It's, well, I can't accept, the surgery not going this way, or I can't accept if, I don't get these results, and I can't have people look at me this way, or I can't stop worrying about what everyone thinks. I need to control that. And so there's this, struggle with, on one side, that drives them, right? So they have this drive, and it's like, well, I can't accept these things, so I drive, and I work. So they're really hard on themselves. They work really hard, which allows them to become very capable and competent, right? And there's this, I'm not going to tolerate failure, so I'm going to work. but then it also becomes a double-edged sword where it can stress them out. And they have a lack of adaptability, a lack of perspective, and it can start to weigh on them, and it will weigh on them and eat them up, and weigh them down. And so on one side, I don't want them to lose the drive of like, oh, we just tolerate failure. It's okay to fail. Like, that's not what acceptance is about. And that's the narrative that gets spun, and the limiting belief that like acceptance is some weak word, that's a weakness, that means you're soft and don't strive and you just tolerate failure. No, instead, we can have the high standards, we can strive for more, and we can be ambitious, and we can have the perspective to understand, to own the situation, and to accept the range of results and the realities, and adapt and learn and keep moving forward. And so now you're doing it in a much more grounded, healthy way. So that's kind of like a foundational limiting belief that I think a lot of high performers struggle with, because they got to becoming a high performer because they're super ambitious. And what's the other side of being super ambitious? It often means they don't tolerate or accept, struggles, failures, adversities. So that's kind of a way to look at it.
Dr. Tilden, do you see a lot of acceptance issues in your work?
Yeah. Well, when Dr. Preston was speaking, I was thinking about the 5 stages of change, and how there's an acceptance phase, and I was just kind of trying to link that to what you were saying, and I like your point that they got to where they are because they're super ambitious, but yeah, like you said, it's kind of a double-edged sword. So yeah, it just reminded me of stages of change.
When you talk about the 5 stages of change, are those the same thing as the 5 stages of grief?
No, this is like they use it a lot in motivational interviewing, and they can apply it a lot to like substance abuse treatment. That's a real big one. Like pre-contemplation, contemplation. I'm gonna stumble on the third one. And then maintenance and acceptance and maintenance. So yeah, you can apply it to a lot of stuff in psychology, but I think one of the main ones is substance abuse treatment.
That's interesting, and I think that to draw a connection that may not exist, both of you please correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think that when you get accustomed to a high level of performance, you do develop, for lack of a better word, an addiction to being at that level. And it can be very jarring and humbling to be out, or feel like you're outside of that level, even if it's just for a moment. And so I think that, Dr. Tilden, with you talking about the 5 stages of change having a lot to do with substance abuse, to me that kind of makes sense, because while it's not at all a substance abuse issue, it is a connection or an addiction, for lack of a better word, to a specific mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, and I do think, people get addicted to success. Think of like fixed growth mindset as well. Like a lot of times high performers, they go on a run of being very successful for a period of time. Sometimes, since they're like, they never face significant failure or adversity. And at some point, challenges are going to arise, and do you know how to deal with it? And if you haven't got that exposure and that experience, and you've got this like addiction to success, and your whole identity is tied to being successful and not facing failure, like you're gonna have a hard time accepting and being adaptable in that moment, and owning it and moving forward and learning and growing. So it just can eat them up. So I think it's a good way to look at that. Like the literature, like Carol Dweck's growth fixed mindset is like through the roof, and so many people know it. And you think of youth sports and just youth in general at school. However, it can be so difficult to get someone to embrace an actual growth mindset. Like you could talk to them about it, you could teach them it. However, we're just like often designed as humans to like, survival and fear, right? So it's like, well, if I fail, I'm bad, and I like, I don't want to be, ousted from the group, or it's like, oh, this would be terrible if I, so it creates these fixed, good, bad, judgmental mind that that we can get stuck in different ways as humans and as we grow. So helping people to be more open, to have acceptance, to focus on growth and expansion, especially again in our consumeristic, judgmental society, can be a bit of a challenge. And then you amplify that by people that have had success on years and years and years, and all of a sudden they face, everybody else is successful. Like, I mean, it's like, or the environment or the economy or something creates adversity, and like, oh, I don't know how to deal with this. So it's a big part of it. So it makes sense why you make that connection.
I'm about to be a dad, but because of that, I'm reading a lot of parenting books, and one of the things that I just read recently was about how important it is to teach your kids to fail early, because no matter who they are, no matter how good they are at everything, how much you train them or teach them or whatever, like they're going to have to confront failure at some point. And learning how to fail and recover is such an important life skill that sometimes even the most successful people have not had a chance to develop because they haven't had failure.
Yeah, no, 100%. I say it all the time in youth sports, where it's like, I think some parents, they give their kids so much opportunity early on, they'll thrive in the sport. And it's like, I don't think you want your kid. Obviously, you can't hold them back overly intentionally, but if you're overly pushing them, they're making them the best soccer player at 9 years old. It's like, and now everyone's going to catch up. Like, it's probably not great for their mentality to just be that dominant at such a young age. Again, there's obviously the exceptions to that, but it's one way to look at it. And even I've got two daughters, one's 7 turning 8 soon, and like the older one's like pretty smart. Often a lot of things have come to her pretty easy. So like, so every once in a while, like something gets hard. Like, what do you mean this is hard to learn? Like, so it's trying to keep an open, I call it an open mindset. It's like, are you open to learning? Are you like, are you focused on the effort and trying to grow? And so it's parenting's a joy for that. It's a good journey to develop life skills, and good luck, Aaron. So and congrats.
Thank you very much.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Dr. Tilden.
So if you are working with, say like the 9-year-old who's dominating her sports, or, her teammates or whatever. And do you think that focusing so much on like one sport at that age, or at a young age, makes the individual lose perspective on what else is important?
Yeah, like I could talk about youth sports till I'm blue in the face. I think there's a lot of structural issues, and there's lots of good research to highlight. Like, early specialization is generally not a healthy endeavor and optimal. So if I had a 9-year-old that was really good at one sport, I make sure they're going into other sports that they're not good at, like just to like keep perspective, and it's for their development, mentally and physically, to be doing multiple sports. And to me, that's a non. And then some sports, like it's kind of almost required to specialize and be like, they're at their peaks at like 15, 16, right? Like, whether that's gymnastics or figure skating, like some of these sports that like, there's always an exception to any rule, but it's like it can get toxic in that environment in general, let alone in any sport. There's early specialization happening in every sport, just because, and because they want to be really good, and the parents they like it, and I'll just keep feeding the one beast because they're good at it. But I think that's a very limited way of looking at it. And then we'll see those athletes come to our company at 15 and they haven't dealt with failure, and all of a sudden everyone's catching up, and they're like, and they've got years of their whole identity is just tied to succeeding. And so encouraging and pushing our boundaries, even as adults, even in like as a surgeon, or like, it's healthy to keep a learner's mindset. Go do something new, like experience something fresh, and push your comfort zones. Like how often, it can change, but I think it's a healthy way to live life. I think to have some playfulness and do spontaneity and do new things versus just life can get you get on autopilot just doing the same thing all the time. So
Yeah.
it's a healthy, I think, aspect of life in general, and especially from a development standpoint, mentally, let alone physically. Yeah, I would encourage doing other sports, and find sports you're not good at, because if you're really good at a sport, so it's a way to look at it.
Yeah, I've worked with a lot of adolescents, and many of them were athletes, and I feel like starting in even like as young as junior high, if not even younger now, if you want to play like soccer, then you have to do like a traveling team if you're good, and then you're doing something for that all year round, and it's expensive and it takes a lot of time to the exclusion of other things.
Yeah,
And I mean, it's like when I was younger, a long time ago, you could play on your high school team if you signed up.
Yeah.
But now that's not happening because you have to have all this other preparation.
Yeah.
And so those are the kids on the high school team. It's not someone who's just like, oh, I'd like to learn volleyball.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Well, a cool example too of just like, if you really want your kid to dominate and do well, and they want to dominate and they really like a sport, look at Serena and Venus Williams, and you watch that documentary. Like,
yeah,
we're not doing travel. Like, you're going to go be a kid and you're just going to practice.
Yeah.
You don't need to go compete to get good at a sport. Like, you don't need to go travel. Like, just, get quality coaching, get reps, healthy development. Like, no one's, being the best at tennis and being validated that you're the best at tennis at 16 help nobody. Like, it's not, and is that healthy for their mind anyway? So, and how much money and stress that causes on, there's just so many issues in that structure of sport that's really not in the benefit of the kids. It's like a parent ego thing. It's a money thing. It's, and it doesn't mean that, structured sport and the competition at the young age is inherently a bad thing. But, to what degree and how much. And I think I encourage parents to be very mindful and not just drink the Kool-Aid. Well, everyone else is doing it, so I got to do it. I'm missing out if I'm not doing it. Mm-hmm. Or you could be like the Williams and just be like, quite beneficial to miss out. Something. Like, I've got a friend here, and hockey's obviously very big. And he's like, my kid's not playing minor hockey. Like, it's just Brent Ice, do his own thing, develop for like that's what they're going to do. They're just going to create their own little, like, small little development program that's not crazy expensive, that has all these tournaments and travel. Like, they just develop. Like, that's create a healthy environment like that. So I was like, that's a great plan. Like, so now it's not, feasible for everyone per se either, but it's actually the opposite is what helps you perform anyways and climb the ranks, not chasing these things, let alone what does that cost at the the mental and well-being stage. And then you're like, well, I can't make my high school volleyball team because I didn't put in hundreds of hours of reps and play rep and do the summer camps and do it. Like, now you don't even get to play a sport that you would have enjoyed. So and Norway is a great example of an actual true development model, right? And I know Iceland soccer does the same thing. A lot of European models, it's like, hey, let everyone play. Like, no one gets cut. Like, everyone can get exposure to quality coaching, because somebody that joins a sport at 16, not very good, but then they might have the aptitude and get the development and have the base athleticism. All of a sudden they could be thriving by the time they're 18, 19. So to be robbing people of, opportunity, but that's our current sports structure. And it's, so I think there's a lot of limitations to it. Not any real easy fixes, just to be clear. So that's not blowing the whole thing up, but that's a whole different discussion that I don't have the answers on. But that was part of my doctoral work, was actually looking at this. And so that's I got lots to say on the structure of sport.
I think that's really important too, and it to me it translates to a business setting as well, because I've seen, and I'm sure a lot of other people have seen, where you'll have a coworker who kind of lags behind or just meets the pack, and then out of nowhere something just clicks for them, and now they're a star, and they're just performing, and everything moves forward a lot quickly or a lot faster because of them. And I think to tie back to what you're saying, when we're effectively cutting people from the team, when we're leaving people out, we're excluding, in some sense, I think, the possibility that there's growth. And I think, to me, and especially in the world of psychology, that's one of the core things, is that we're all human. We all have the capacity for growth.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think it definitely applies in multiple ways to the business sector and working environments where it's like, what is the culture of the company? What is the structure of a company? How do we operate and think? And like, are we allowing people to be open, to explore, to fail, to try, to actually say things? I think that matters so much, and to be mindful of the structure that we create. And yeah, I've got clients, like a lot of like investing clients, or one guy's in it's like mergers, acquisitions, kind of like big firm, and it's like it's just such a results oriented firm, and it's like, so outcome oriented, not a lot of like collaboration. It's very judgmental, and so it's just like you could just tell, like it's just not like, and it's just the whole thing is just a stress bucket. That makes sense. Like, and so it's like trying to get him to make the most out of it, but he's in a tough environment, and you see that in sports, even just like you think of like a team environment. The Carolina Hurricanes won the cup, like such a collaborative, autonomy, supportive. It's a different environment, whereas often it's like, dog eat dog world, and they're pulling each other down, and so the structure and the environments that we build and are part of, and we're all shaping them in different ways, and especially the people at the top, like that really matters to create a high functioning team. And so you can look at youth sport as a structure overall, let alone individual teams, and what are the values and the philosophies we're bringing to sport, and what's the impact of that. So, but the same can be applied to business.
That's actually a good segue to another question. In the NFL, 60 to 70% of, wow, I hope that's not true. That's so terrible. 60 to 70% of athletes are broke after 5 years of retirement. Are you involved with their financial health after the game has passed them by?
Well, if I had an athlete, I hope that doesn't happen to them. So, but I'm not directly tied to that. Generally, I definitely talk to some of my pro athletes about their financial endeavors, less from like a consulting, here's what the investments you should do, and more so because that's definitely not my expertise, but more so from a mindset standpoint, because just because they're a great athlete doesn't mean they're like very competent business professional or investor. And so it's like, hey, who do they want to be? Who do they want to surround themselves? What approach do they want? Are they being intentional with how they show up here? Or are they just like dumping it and forgetting about it? And then the stress that can cause them. And so, are they even doing any of it at all? Are they just overspending? So that's a whole, probably part of the NFL stats. And so, no, I do think it's important to educate on, financial literacy. And I do think it's important. There's a huge mental component to it too, especially if you didn't, you weren't surrounded or grew up, with a healthy mindset around money, right? Like a lot, like my dad, I'll just give a quick personal story. So like my dad grew up in like poverty, more or less, like, they like built their own house, they live in a shack, like, Northern Ontario. And, but then he became a medical doctor. So I didn't grow up in poverty, but then my dad had like some mindsets from his, like, about money. And so I was fortunate enough to read lots of books and got educated about money. And, I think I have there's been evolutions in my family kind of lineage line that way, if that makes sense. So where sometimes it's like, hey, people keep thinking about, life, success, sport, business, money, just because it was passed down from, further generations. So when you go from, hey, maybe somebody in the NFL didn't grow up with, they weren't exposed to someone that, invests money a lot, or, thriving business or income state, and then all of a sudden they have all this money, and I don't know what to do. So like, do they have any support and coaching, and can they spend just a little bit of time and energy? Hey, who do I want to be as somebody that, and how do I show up and handle my wealth and my income? And so, yes, I do touch on it, but it's definitely not a primary thing I do. It's often a second, third thing when it becomes especially a source of stress. I find hopefully a lot of the people, and I think the teams, I guess maybe the NFL is not doing a great job of it. Often there's like, you surround themselves with good enough people, they have enough wealth. Hopefully they're making good decisions, but you see it go awry too. I know one guy in the NHL, I forget the name actually, I won't try, but his parents would manage his money, made him go bankrupt, like spent all his money, like just like, ooh, like, so that's tough. That's a tough look. But so, no, I definitely think it's really important because, especially in the NFL where the careers are so short. So it's like, that's gonna, what are they going to do after? And they want to be very, I think, smart and make financial decisions with their wealth so that they have time to adapt and figure out other sources of, creating value in the world after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's so important, and it leads into something that we end up talking about a lot, because we've met with financial advisors and talked about the relationship between mental health and financial health and things like that. But
Mhm.
it's so important, especially when you're performing at an elite level, to surround yourself or to get insights from people who can effectively protect your flank, because there's going to be some things that you've spent so much time being great at what you are great at,
Yeah.
that you haven't had the time to really learn about other things. And that's why I think it's so important to get yourself the right support, get yourself, a financial advisor, get yourself, a therapist, a coach, a whatever that can support you in the areas that, you're not going to be proficient. And that's totally understandable, I think, for anyone to not be proficient in anything, in everything, because, that's how life works.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, surrounding yourself with good people is just, and people that have different specialties is, I think so important. And also, I'm a big fan of, like, even with what I do, like I'll give guidance and give suggestions
Mhm.
and support. I want the client, the athlete, to make it their own, and they got to take what works for them and own it. And I'm more of a sounding board and a guide, more than like I have full control of their mindset. Like that's a bit much. So it's kind of the way I wear my hat. And what I encourage clients is like, hey, you're gonna take ownership of this. However, surround yourself and lean on me as a resource and a guide to like help you optimize it, more effectively. And then doing that in other areas of life, I think is, it just makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Dr. Tilden, did you want to add anything?
I don't think at this time. I've just taken it all in. Well, kind of, you said surround yourself with good people. It actually brought to mind, for a political example, when Abraham Lincoln ran, he put on his cabinet several people he ran against. So, and they weren't like all from his party or anything, because he said, I want to, I want to have different people's opinions. I don't want everyone just to be like a yes man.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that was interesting that he did that, and that's what I was thinking of when you were speaking about it.
Yeah, and I think I'm a big, I think it's Phil Stutz has a line around like sometimes you go to your friends and you just want them to listen, and then you like go to your therapist or your coach or whatever, and you want them to give advice, and then all they do is listen. So it's like yeah, sometimes, and obviously my job is to listen, or sometimes it's to give my opinion, and it's like, hey, like this is what I to some degree, obviously sometimes you can't overly give an opinion, but it's like, hey, based on what you're saying and how you're showing up, like seems like maybe think about operating this way, and if that suits you. And as well as to your point, like sometimes friends are just yes people, like they're not going to challenge somebody. And I think when you're surrounding yourself with good people, they're not afraid to challenge you or call you out. And I think that that's a good signal. Like in my company and the people one of my guys is literally on his job like description is like, make sure you challenge everything I say. Just play the devil's advocate, because otherwise some people just want to be oh yeah, great idea. Everyone's just thinking I've got great ideas. I'm like, are they great? Of course I think they're good. I'm saying them. That's his job, literally, to challenge it. So I think that's an important part that you bring up.
Mm-hmm.
I think also we as humans, we grow from challenge. And I think in certain areas, we tend to overlook that. Hopefully not in every area, but I think a lot of times, we'll see a challenge and just instinctively we'll see the hardship that comes with it, whether it comes from somebody pushing back against our ideas or whether it comes from, we just have to do something that we really don't want to do that's hard. Um, but I think, when we're talking about a mindset focus and a perspective focus, challenges are also consistently opportunities for growth, opportunities to learn something new, opportunities to get better at something. Um, and I think that that's part of the reason, at least for me, that I was interested in sports. Um, is because it is a place where you can consistently get challenged and consistently improve and see that improvement the next time you're playing. But it's also a place where it can get very frustrating very quickly when you're just losing
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah. One of my favorite analogies for challenge and adversity is from Brian Johnson. And he uses this analogy of like the wind. This gust of wind is an
Mhm.
adversity. So sometimes really strong gust of wind. And then you have this choice. Are you going to be a candle that flickers and maybe gets put out by by the wind and the adversity? Or can you be a bonfire that actually uses it as fuel, and then the bonfire actually grows and gets even bigger? And so it's a great narrative and
Mhm.
a picture in your mind and be like, it's time to be a bonfire. Like, let me use this to help me grow and evolve from this versus like, it's shutting me down and frustrating me. And, what's the point? Like, I can't deal with this. Well, it's your awareness and choice again. Like, all right, like, do I want to be a candle or I want to be a bonfire in this moment? And it doesn't mean you have to be a bonfire and everything. You don't have to specialize in everything. What challenges do you want in life? You can't escape challenges, right? Is that, philosophy. So it's like, well, if you can't escape challenges, which ones do you want, and then lean into them as a bonfire. So, yeah, you're right on that. I think challenges and our relationship with challenges is so important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, so I want to circle back to companies and just general well-being. How can companies build a culture where employees feel safe admitting their mental health struggles without losing their competitive edge?
Ooh, good question. Well, it's funny, like even just doing it in my own company, the couple different ways of doing that, but one would be the vulnerability and honesty of the leaders doing it first and foremost. So, um, like I'll attest that there is nobody that doesn't have, fears, worries, sadness, doubt, frustration. We all experience it in different degrees at different times in different ways. Now, how much does the leader of a company or anybody within a company need to overly share their personal life and feelings? There is such a thing as oversharing and just dumping to dump. So that's not what I'm encouraging. However, to show that vulnerability is a strength. To share what's going on in someone's life and be open and honest about it in a, maybe there's some boundaries within it to be strategic emotional expressions in a way as like, hey, this is what I've gone through or been through or been experiencing or just recently experienced. That honesty and vulnerability that takes now allows others to then put their guard down and allow them to also share back. And so we can grow together. And I love the narrative I've used a lot recently. It comes from a while ago, but there's a story about how lobsters grow. Okay. And the premise is lobsters are out doing lobster things, and then they start to get uncomfortable inside their shell. So that's their signal to go hide under a rock, a safe place, let go of their old shell and grow a new shell. And now that new shell is bigger. So now they can go back out, they do their lobster things, and they could grow inside this new shell until all of a sudden they get uncomfortable again. And that's the signal, time to go grow again. They go into a safe place under a rock, let go of the old shell and grow a bigger new shell, and on it goes. And so that is the same for humans in our own emotional and life growing, cycle, where there's moments where the emotions get uncomfortable. That's the signal. It's time to grow. And one of the best ways to go grow is to go into a safe place, take your shell off, and be vulnerable. And doing that with other people is often the best way to do it, because then there's connection, there's support, you're with other people, but it has to be a safe place. You're not just dumping this online, like might get chewed up. Like, that's not, that's not a safe place per se. Just dumping it to anybody on the street or somebody that's not holding the space for you. And so that's very much like my role and my team's role. Like, we're that safe place where people can take their shell off and they grow a new one, and they evolve and grow, and they go back out, do the thing. When there's emotional discomfort and, feelings come up, and we can help them process, evolve, and grow again, and on. It never ends, right, in life. And so again, go back to like, what can a leader first and foremost do? Share their moments where, again, strategically, it doesn't have to be they're growing with the people, but sharing about their growth experiences, the moments where they took their lobster shell off. And so, so that's one kind of like first and foremost thing. If a leader's not willing to be vulnerable and honest, then like, why would anybody else do so within the company? And then the flip side is creating the space for others to do so. So think of like, I just had this reflection recently where they're like, hey, we can have a quarterly meeting with someone you oversee or manage, or et cetera. And there could be two purposes for that. On one side, there's like, reviews and how's work going and priorities. And there's more of like a, work intentional structure. And then the other though, which is good to do probably like on some point in some ways. And then how often, once a year, twice a year, can you have more of a meeting where it's just like, what are the challenges going on in your life? And also it could be a one-on-one where you share, here's what I've been going through. Would love to just be able to support, hear more about what's, the harder things you're working through right now, like that you're willing to share and want to lean on us as, your lobster shell under the rock moment here. Doesn't have to be ongoing. You're not becoming someone's, therapist or coach unnecessarily, but it's like, hey, it's just showing you care, you're interested, want to support them in their own ongoing development. That's creating a very, meaningful, deep, connections. And obviously every culture is different. Every, and company's different values and different people. That's just one way to maybe look at creating a culture where people have levels of vulnerability, openness, honesty, and which is going to foster growth, which is what we really want, I think. So, and the more people are growing inside of a culture, the more they're going to perform in their job. Like it goes one in without the other. And to overly focus on just job performance without personal growth, let's call it, or, evolving as humans and expanding and thriving in their own life overall, like what's the point? Like, and how sustainable is it anyways? And how much does this feed the company performance? So, I think those are some of my reflections or suggestions. Maybe not in the most coherent way, but I think I got it across.
I know we don't have that much longer left, but I did want to ask you, say like take Naomi Osaka, and this great tennis player who could play in front of thousands of people, but she was too anxious to do the media parts of her job, which they're required to do. Mm-hmm. And so, she wasn't allowed to go to certain tournaments and stuff because she's like, I'm just so anxious talking with people, I can't do it. And so she took time off to work on her mental health and her anxiety and everything. Yep. And, so I think in that case, like her being open and honest about her mental health kind of worked against her. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's obviously a tough one for her. And you see, athletes are so unique. They'll just people just ridicule them for anything. So like they get treated like a number versus like a human. It's like these people have lives. Like they're not just a pure performer that doesn't have a life away from the sport. Yeah. And in that context, in that situation, is it right? Is it wrong? Is it fair? I obviously think on one side it's like, it doesn't seem fair. She's a tennis player, not a media expert. So like, but if that's the agreement and the structure of the sport, then it is what it is. So, and then at least she's doing her best to hopefully adapt and evolve and grow so that she can go to all the tournaments that she wants to. But, on the highest level, it seems unfair. Obviously, she didn't sign up to be a media spokesperson. She signed up to play tennis. So, but if that's the structure that you're in, then it is what it is. And we echoed that back to like a work environment. It's like, hey, I signed up to be a salesperson. I got to go give a speech to all these people, but I'm like, I'm not comfortable doing that. And then how, like, it's, I think those are opportunities for us to grow, is the way I always try to like frame it. Goes, it's a challenge. It's uncomfortable. Okay, well, do you want to grow from it or not? And evolve. That's what I would encourage. Of course, sometimes you can see like, no, like I don't want to. I mean, like I'm not interested in going. Okay, cool. Maybe you got to switch, jobs or limit your, hey, don't go to those tournaments. Don't go to change your role a bit to with your needs. But yeah, and I also will articulate, just because we don't want to do something, we don't like doing something, doesn't mean don't do it. Like again, goes back to like pushing our comfort zones. That is often the best reason to do something. So I forget. I think it was like last night with my daughter shooting the basketball around. I don't know, it's like, well, because you don't like it, we're gonna do it more now. I was like, I'm choking a little bit, but it's like, okay, great. That was a good growing opportunity. It was got uncomfortable, and then all of a sudden she's liking it. And so we're definitely not overly pushing her, but to do it, like I didn't really care, but it was just her early resistance was kind of funny. I was like, well, that's it's a little much. So, but yeah. A couple thoughts.
I had a conversation not too long ago with a professor of mine, and he was saying that everything in his world ultimately boils down to bandwidth. Like every person only has so much bandwidth they can deal with, and there's 3 options. You can figure out how to extend your bandwidth, reduce the cost of something you really need to do on that bandwidth, or you can prioritize.
Yeah,
that's it. But I have found in my own life, sometimes when things get hectic or too much, it is grounding, for lack of a better word, to focus on those 3 options of, okay, do I need to extend my bandwidth? Do I need to figure out how to reduce the amount that a specific task takes from me? Or do I just need to start dropping things and focus on what's really important? But I have found personally, and either of you please push back or correct me, but being able to focus on the core of those things when things get overwhelming, when you're confronting failure, when whatever, it can be a very grounding and focusing place to be.
Right. I mean, it can present, as Dr. Preston was saying, it presents, an opportunity if you really embrace it. A failure, hopefully you learn from it and you move on, or you pivot, you do something, that you learn from it.
Yeah. I love the bandwidth narrative. Like that's just a great way to like reference, the challenges that you're facing. It's like, hey, this is a challenge. Do I want to expand my bandwidth? Do I want to simplify the task so it can fit in my bandwidth? Or do I want to reprioritize and drop stuff so that it's not sort of like just say no to things? And, very, healthy framework that's very simple, yet, puts the autonomy and the choice on the individual with the first option being expand. Just expand your bandwidth. Like a lot of times, like, oh, I can't deal with it. Says who? Who's saying you can't deal with it? Like we're putting these limits on ourselves. It's like, oh, well, expand my capacity to do it. Now there's a time and place to be like, I need to say no. Like, and there's when you say no to something, it's a big lesson, especially high performers. Well, now I get to say yes to something else. Right? It fits well in the bandwidth. As well as like, hey, do I really need to do it X, Y, and Z way, or can I just do X? and simplify certain things, and we get caught up in distractions. So yeah, I think that's a great framework, and I definitely use those. And I've never used the bandwidth with that 3-layered thing, but I definitely use those all the time. And in my own life, it's like, all right, it's just something I'm expanding, saying no to, simplifying. Like I'm constantly using that kind of a lens. So I will be stealing that and using that more formally with the word bandwidth around it. So not that I've never used the word bandwidth, but maybe I haven't. So that's great. That's great, Aaron. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you. So we are about out of time, but I want to ask, just to send people off with, what is one thing that you think people can can do now, that can do today to help them be more comfortable in performing in high stress, high performance areas?
Yeah, well, I would pick, one thing that they want to grow at, or be stronger at, or have more simplicity or more confidence in. And then, so that's the moment. So whether that's like going to give the speech, or dealing with this moment of the day, or coming home to the kids and the kids are going crazy, like, and you want to stay calm, and then be really clear, and take the time to reflect, well, who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? Not just what do I want to do, but how do I want to feel? And contrast that with what you don't want. And it's learning to see it for what it is and accept the emotions and the realities, not judging it. And then, hey, I have this awareness that, yeah, it's normal to have this feeling. However, I can now choose this feeling as well. And so creating a bit of a narrative, we call it an alter ego, is a strategy we use, where then they can even, like a story, like the bandwidth, the bonfire is a story, right? That these stories that then can apply to evoke that feeling, that state in those key moments. That'd be one simple, it's not super easy, but hopefully pretty practical. Don't have to be too hard either, but hopefully practical strategy for people to try out.
Awesome. Thank you so much to Dr. Preston and to Dr. Tilden for joining us. Feel free to put a question in the comments, anything like that, and we'll get back to you if we have any answers. And thank you to everybody for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Dr. Preston.
Okay, thank you. Nice meeting you both.